Greetings. Welcome to our User Advisory Committee introductory meeting. My name is Doug Matson, and I'm here at the annual meeting for the American Society for Gravitational and Space Research, along with a distinguished panel of visitors who are part of our event today. I'm going to introduce our executive director, and then he will have a short video to show you.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. I filmed a video here about 2 days ago. Hopefully it'll impress everybody. If it doesn't, you'll find me here at the conference and you can give me some critiques. So we can roll the video, I think.
Good morning. I'm Ray Lugo, Chief Executive Officer for the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space, manager of the International Space Station National Lab. I am here this morning to welcome you and to thank you for your interest in this User Advisory Committee, dedicated towards fostering collaboration for new and novel avenues to utilize the ISS National Laboratory. We want to work together to promote scientific and technological advancements through space-based inquiry that will bring value to our nation and drive a robust and sustainable market in low Earth orbit. For more than 10 years, CASIS has had the privilege to manage the ISS National Lab, and during that time frame, this organization has worked with NASA, implementation partners, private sector companies, other government agencies, academia, nonprofits, and students. We strive to push the boundaries of science and innovation, opening access and opportunity for the research community to leverage this one-of-a-kind orbiting outpost. Over the years, demand and interest in utilization of the space station has risen exponentially. Now is the time for us to take advantage of the knowledge gained from those hundreds of payloads launched in the last decade. Now is the time for us to tap into the best use cases for the ISS National Lab. Now is the time to enable scientific and technological innovations that bring even greater benefit to the American taxpayer and to further business opportunities in space so that one day there will be many platforms orbiting around our beautiful planet, catering to the needs of the private sector and general research communities. Now is the time to tap into the next generation of researchers, engineers, and explorers so they can become part of this growing space community. This User Advisory Committee provides a new avenue for the ISS National Lab to hear from those incredibly important to the space station family. I look forward to following your progress and your suggestions to leverage the National Lab, and more importantly, I look forward to working with you to implement all the concepts that come from this community. Again, thank you for your willingness to participate in the ISS National Lab User Advisory Committee.
All right. Well, that was very good to hear from Ray. And what I'd like to do is briefly introduce our audience to the purpose of the User Advisory Committee and the approach that we take. We have been chartered by NASA's cooperative agreement to represent the users of the CASIS and our International Space Station facilities. We're a new organization. We were actually chartered to start in about February of earlier this year. So that's why we're having this workshop, is to try to get people to understand who we are and what we're doing. The framework was that we're serving as an advocacy group for the entire ISS community. We're going to provide communication between stakeholders, so between the various user communities, NASA, and CASIS management. And specifically, we advise the ISS National Lab Executive Director on all important issues that we, the users, believe need to be addressed. Next slide, please. So our overall organization is based on the communities that we're serving. In this case, we have 5 subcommittees, each with a chairman, and these subcommittees act relatively independently and then get together as a group, the overall UAC group, to figure out how it is each of us can basically address the issues that are of concern and learn about what other people have as their concerns so that we can all come out with the highest benefit for the entire community. In this case, we're divided into 5 subcommittees. The first is chaired by Ted Tagami. It's the Educational Outreach Committee. Alessandro Grattoni chairs the Technology Demonstration Subcommittee. Jeffrey Manbeer is the current chair of the Commercial Service Provider Subcommittee. Nicole Wagner is our Applied Research and Development Chair, and I serve as the Science Chair. Next slide. In addition to the activities of the subcommittees, we've also have special requirements. Task forces have been put together in this, our first year. Ted Tagami chaired a introductory meeting task force, and that was basically to put together this workshop, trying to find out how can we contact all the various people who are interested in becoming part of the UAC, educate them about how it is we go about what we do, and hopefully provide you, the audience, with a way to get in touch with us so that you can become part of our mission. The second task force that was arranged was chaired by Nicole Wagner, and she was helping us to actually implement that communication. We need to have a web portal so that people can write to us and tell us what issues are of concern to them. And we can post our activities so you can keep track of what it is we're doing. And also read about what other concerns there are so that you can help us to come up with solutions to optimize use of the facility. Next slide, please. Oh, please. And there we had a website that's available, and it'll be shown as well at the end of our presentation today. Go ahead. Yeah, next slide. Overall, each subcommittee meets quarterly, and the web page will have the days on which these meetings will be held to allow the public to come in. These are open meetings, and you can review our meeting notes from past meetings to keep yourself informed as to where we are going and how our progress is, how we're moving forward working together. In general, our subcommittees meet January, April, July, and October. And that's to support the chair's meeting in February and the UAC's yearly get-together in August. And all of that goes into reporting at Science Week, when CASIS and NASA will be reporting to the Hill. And in October, there's a big meeting where CASIS and NASA discuss how the progress for that year have gone. And of course, we currently are in November with the ASGSR meeting. That is an important group of stakeholders from across all 5 of the subcommittees. And ASGSR provides for a good time for people to network and cross-communicate and learn about how it is this operation works. Next slide, please. So, after that brief introduction, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to the various subcommittee chairs and let them talk a little bit about their activities. And our first subcommittee chair, if I could go to next slide, is Ted Tagami for the Educational Outreach Subcommittee. Ted?
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Ray. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the ASGSR meeting for 2021. I'm really excited to be able to share the Education Subcommittee interest in reaching out to the community and hearing from everyone. We stand to listen more than anything else on how we might leverage this incredible asset in orbit that's been up there for 2 decades, managed by cases for more than 10. And it's at our disposal, whether it's K-12 or whether it's at the university level, at the collegiate level. It's an incredible asset that really requires an interdisciplinary approach to the future. For the last 4 years, I've had the great fortune of being able to work with CASIS and have our projects running in orbit for students around the world. And I can only imagine that those that are listening here, whether you're at the conference or you're in the classroom, you probably have some ideas on how we might better utilize that. So we definitely encourage you to attend our meetings, to listen in, to write. I think if you go to the issnationallab.org website now, you'll see a form. Please fill out that form. We'd love to hear from you, and your feedback, as I said, is really, really critical. I unfortunately am not able to make it to Baltimore, this pandemic and everything else and scheduling, what have you. I guess if there's any benefit, I've got a smaller carbon footprint, right? But there are some committee members that are there, and I encourage you to meet with them. Melissa Pore will be there all week, a high school teacher. Danny Kim will be there toward the end of the week, has a wonderful company comparable to what we do at Magnitude. And Samantha Thorstensen, our education lead for CASIS, is in attendance, as well as Dr. Michael Roberts. And so please reach out to them. We've got a little video we'll share. And with that, I'll be hanging around for the Q&A at the end. So why don't we go ahead and play the video? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ted Tagami, co-founder of a company called Magnitude and education chair for the User Advisory Committee of CASIS, the Center for Advancement of Science in Space, which manages the U.S. National Laboratory on the International Space Station. The International Space Station is an extraordinary piece of equipment that's been up there for 2 decades. And I think now is the time, more than ever, here in the shadow of the pandemic recovery, to show leadership, to think about technology, engineering, mathematics, the sciences, and where it's all going. Incredible breakthroughs and discoveries are happening right now across all the domains. I encourage you all to reach out to the Advisory Committee of Education to share your thoughts on how we might best leverage this national asset for all, like to say K to Gray, as we look at some of the greatest challenges to face civilization as long as civilization has been around. I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. Thank you.
My job as a teacher is to make sure that I provide the best education possible for my students. I do this with space. Using education resources provided by the National Lab, I can demonstrate what it is truly like to live and work in microgravity. Through activities like ARIS, Amateur Radio on the International Space Station, and the Sally Ride EarthCam program, we can demonstrate actual on-orbit procedures that allow students hands-on experience with real equipment used by astronauts and scientists. Through these amazing resources, we are able to immerse students in real-world science, project-based learning, and point their sights upward as we encourage them to take risks with new challenges. And last, the Space Station Explorer program allows teachers to find their first step on that pathway to their own space dreams. I joined the Ambassador program so I could take that extra leap into the space network and find a permanent place for my own groove. Currently, we have over 1,600 space station teacher ambassadors sharing experiences and resources in this community, and now we need you.
Greetings. I'm Jennifer Scott Williams, manager of the Applications Client Support Office at NASA's Johnson Space Center. The International Space Station program and CASIS ISS National Lab have a very strong relationship to ensure that STEM content can be conducted on board the International Space Station through programs such as Genes in Space, Storytime from Space, Tomatosphere, and many other programs that educators, students, and the general public can participate in. It is our responsibility to not only ensure that critical research is done on the ISS, but the benefits of that research can reach us here on the ground.
Hi, I'm Katie Coleman. I'm a retired astronaut. I'm retired from going to space. Well, maybe, you never know, right? But I am retired from NASA. But I'm not retired from the NASA mission. And that is why I support the national laboratory that is our International Space Station. I was part of doing science experiments up there that were run by CASIS, the Center of the Advancement of Science in Space, and others as well. But there's something special about the way CASIS does things, that the National Lab does things, where it's not just the experiment itself and its results. It is so many more dimensions than that. It is how to share that with parents, with teachers, with students, with other scientists. All those dimensions are addressed in almost every national lab experiment because that's just what they've built into the culture. And so something as simple as let's encourage kids to read. Well, astronauts are reading books to kids in space, and guess what? Reading is catching on. Astronauts are doing science experiments involving plants, understanding how do we grow food for Mars, and yet really big lessons for food here on Earth as well. How do we understand the chemistry and the physics and how our own bodies work? That's so important for health down here on Earth, and also important for explorer health. And these kids, these students, I'm going to say students big and small, they know it. They feel it. They understand that these are important missions and they want to be a part of them. The National Lab is a magical place. It's a place where science is happening, but more importantly, it's a place where we are bringing up and educating the future. And I think that we're doing it in a way that everyone feels welcome. And we're really paying attention to that because we understand how important it is that everyone play a part in the future.
Hi, my name is Danny Kim. I'm the CEO of Quest Institute. One of the things that we love doing is inspiring kids through education and inspiring them to do things on space, on board the International Space Station, that gives them the motivation to learn. If you give them a platform to do that, they really excel. Just like the platform you see behind me, it's a platform to perform, whether you learn musical instruments or theater or art, they perform and they excel. What we love is creating a platform that allows kids to explore all the benefits and all of the excitement of STEM. Instead of just looking at the stars through an observatory, imagine the impact it has when they are able to look at the stars, but also do science experiments on board the International Space Station. That's what CASIS and the ISS National Laboratory does for us, is it provides us a platform where students can express and be motivated to learn. These are the next generation, the future scientists, engineers, and astronauts. And I hope you will invest in the International Space Station and ISS National Lab with us.
Hi, I'm Alana Rea, and I'm the founder of ETRA, a mentorship platform for girls. What I love so much about the ISS National Lab is not just that it offers such a deep bench of resources, space station explorers, ambassadors, internships, and fellowships, but that they offer a tremendous number of mentors right for students to access. I'm talking about women in leadership roles in labs, partner organizations, and in orbit. And the mentors offer springboards to help you reach your goals. Things like awards and scholarships, space grant consortiums and student challenges. And so my question to you from the Education Subcommittee is, rising STEM students, where are you headed? What are you curious about? And where do you see your future going? Because futures like space have no borders, and the mentors you need are here at the National Lab.
Hi, I'm Stephen White, Chief Strategy Officer at COSI, the Center of Science and Industry. I'm also proud to support and serve in the incredible work that's being done on the International Space Station National Lab and the great work on the education front that they're bringing to bear. This pandemic has created some challenges and exacerbated an education gap across our nation, particularly for those students of color, those students of disabilities, students living in rural communities and inner cities like the one I'm in here today. As a first-generation college student, I know all too well that we can overcome these challenges and we can do it together. And that's why I'm excited to share that the International Space Station National Lab has critical educational resources that you can use, whether you're a teacher, an educator, a parent, or someone that just looks up into the sky with curiosity. So whether it's story time with an astronaut reading Rosie Revere the Engineer, or all the amazing educational programs that's available for free on the ISS National Lab, I encourage you to check out all of those resources. The message is clear. The ISS National Lab stands ready to serve and help bridge this education gap, and I hope that you will check it out.
All right, thank you, Ted. That was a fantastic presentation. I'd like to turn it over now to Alessandro Grattani.
Good morning. My name is Alessandro Grattoni, and I'm the chair of the Technology Development Subcommittee. I serve also as a professor and chairman of the Department of Nanomedicine at the Houston Methodist Research Institute. I will want to start introducing the committee members, subcommittee members. Together with me, there is Danielle Wood, Dr. Danielle Wood, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics at MIT. Dr. Heath Mills, who's a CSO at Rhodium Scientific. Dr. Brian Hess, who's a CEO of Rep Bio. Henry Hanson, who's a mechanical engineer at Adidas. And Ms. Christy Cox, who's at NASA, who works at NASA. Our charges for our subcommittee is to function as in an advisory capacity to provide a UAC with the technology development input and perspective about the utilization of ISS National Lab resources, and also to provide recommendation on how to improve on the current processes for the effective use of these ISS resources. So we will assess the current utilization processes, evaluate the potential initiative that the ISS National Laboratory may take to that would lead to improvements. And then we would provide obviously reports and communicate the finding to the UAC. We have designed a shareholder survey to be able to gather relative information related to the development of technologies on the International Space Station. The objective is really to understand what are the current limitations and what is actually working, as well as trying to really reach the broadest number of users of the International Space Station in the context of technology development. The current survey distribution has reached 70 representative users of the ISS National Laboratory in the context of technology development, but we are working toward a broader distribution with the help of the International Space Station and the ISS National Laboratories. The current number of respondents is 29. And we have been able to compile a set of results that provide an interim understanding of the data that we have been looking for. So I will go quickly through the results. First of all, the respondents, the vast majority of respondents, they come from companies, private companies, and the vast majority of which is startup. These are startup company, and there is about 30% of respondents that are coming from the academia. Clearly, the technology under development are primarily dedicated to the biomedical sector. 80% nearly of the respondents are working in this field, followed by about 10% of space infrastructure, spacecraft, and space habitats, and among others, and then follow again by a smaller percentage from Earth observation, food and instrumentation, and scientific equipment. The vast majority, about 95% of respondents, is aware of the opportunity that exists to conduct technology development on board on the International Space Station. And also, the vast majority of them, 80%, they are aware of all the resources, the equipment, and the infrastructure, and the environmental condition on the International Space Station. And they got to know of all of these from information they obtained through the MASS Challenge, the ISS National Laboratory website, NASA or ISS National Laboratory RFAs, as well as from implementation partner companies. About 13% of non-respondents, the vast majority of which are from the academia, have not had much information with regard to these resources. And while 7%, so a smaller percentage, would still prefer to have additional information. So ideally, again, we would try to understand, the ISS National Laboratory has been dedicating a lot of effort for technology that have to do with terrestrial application. Clearly, the responses have shown that that's the case. They all acknowledge the fact that the ISS National Laboratory provides unique resources for studies, research and development that is not feasible on Earth, either for technology related to space or for terrestrial application. Also, very importantly, they have highlighted that the investigation on the ISS provides enhanced visibility through media, as well as additional marketing opportunities. As I mentioned, again, most of the technologies under development are dedicated to terrestrial medicine or to both terrestrial and space technologies in general. So the respondents have indicated that in the vast majority of times they have been receiving funding from NASA, NIH, DoD, so federal institutions for studies on the International Space Station, and these have been utilized along with additional funding from their own individual organization. So one important aspect with regard to funding is that the respondents, 30% of respondents they potentially have an interest in performing science on the International Space Station, regardless of receiving funding from the government. But another equivalent number of individuals, about 33%, indicated that this would be prohibitive, and therefore federal funding are absolutely needed for this. Looking at the limitation, the current limitation and barriers for technology development on the International Space Station, the primary limitation are associated with the cost of the studies, as well as the time and uncertainty in timing for performing the analysis and performing this investigation on the International Space Station. Another good percentage of individuals have indicated that there are challenges associated with the preparation of the experiments and the hardware for the actual projects. Several individuals had about 30% of respondents indicated that they had to interrupt projects in the course of execution because of lack of funding support. And also for half of these, they have indicated challenges in coordinating efforts with International Space Station National Laboratory. Most of the study requires crew time. This is very important. About 85% of respondents indicated that crew time is needed. And in many instances also multiple flights are needed. So it's always important to consider that, again, for technology developments, you may need to go through several phases in your project development, and therefore multiple flights may be required. The space flight for most respondents represents an opportunity that will inform on technology development and will serve as a go and no-go criteria for further developments. The technology, the analysis that is done in space may also provide, in certain instances, information regarding the ability of potentially recovering the cost from the investigation, but also an information of whether this technology could be eventually profitable. We requested to the respondent to provide particular information on how would they suggest to improve the process for technology development on the International Space Station, and the areas of improvement include streamlining the funding process, and of course increasing also the opportunities for funding, and then improve on the cases grant organization and a review process for increased transparency, and potentially improve the outreach effort to increase awareness about the opportunities as well as the equipment and infrastructure, specifically for the academic sector. So if we want to look and summarize all of these, the key points, the key takeaway points are the following. So the ISS caters primarily to private companies and academia in the biomedical sector. The ISS enable development of technologies that are not feasible on Earth and mostly are focused on terrestrial application. It also offers particular visibility and marketing opportunities. The funding source that are used for studies on the International Space Station are really a mix between federal funding and private funding. However, federal funding appears to be necessary for successful execution of studies and research and development. The biggest challenge are cost, uncertainty in timing, and challenges in designing the experiment. And often, to add to the complexity, is that multiple flights are needed, and in most cases, they require crew time. The opportunities for improvement definitely include the outreach, especially in the academic sector, and also there are opportunity for increasing funding opportunity, perhaps by partnering between ISS National Laboratory and other federal agencies or other foundation or science-based institutions. With this, I conclude my presentation. I just would like to inform you that our subcommittee meetings are scheduled for the dates that you can see for 2022, with the first date being on January 12th from 2 to 3 p.m. Central Time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Alessandro will be available for questions during the question and answer session at the end. We're now going to move on to the next slide, please. And the commercial service provider group, headed by Jeff Manber. Jeff is not available for these discussions. So we have Stephanie Countryman coming in. She will be talking about this subcommittee now at this meeting. Stephanie?
Good afternoon, everybody. I am the director of BioServe Space Technologies. BioServe is one of the commercial service providers represented on this subcommittee. The subcommittee is wholly made up of representatives from the commercial service provider industry, which is a small industry yet plays a critical role in the utilization of the space station from a commercial and fundamental research and technology and product development perspective. You can see here a list of the subcommittee members who I will read off for you. We have Rich Bowling from TechShot, Twyman Clements from Space Tango, Carol Craig from Craig Technical Consulting Group. We have Ron Dunkley from Airbus, Kevin Foley from Boeing, Mark Gittleman from Aegis Aerospace, Justin Kugler from Redwire, Robert McKnight from Northrop Grumman, and myself. All of the groups represented on this subcommittee have facilities, platforms, or other hardware that is currently operating on board the space station. We also have agreements with NASA or CASIS for the operations of those facilities on space station and for the use of the ISS National Lab. You can see from the list of members of the subcommittee that we represent both small and large organizations, both for-profit and nonprofit. And each of the groups have various areas of focus and expertise with regards to research and technology development on station. We believe our group represents all of the users of the ISS National Lab, but with the particular focus of the commercial service provider perspective and our customers' perspective. Our subcommittee is just a little bit behind all the other subcommittees. While we did have a meeting back in April, we are still working on scheduling our future meetings and developing our draft goals and objectives. If we can move to the next slide, please. So these are considered in draft form. They may change, but we are working on them. So as an overall goal, our subcommittee believes that we're a unifying voice to the ISS National Lab with respect to the advancement of research and development platforms that are currently on the ISS National Lab. In terms of objectives, we want to be able to be involved in the discussions around policy and regulatory issues that involve the commercial services providers and our customers as it relates to the use of the International Space Station National Lab. We want to be able to have a focus group where we can share opinions and perspectives and also provide recommendations and solutions to challenges that the industry faces and challenges that maybe are raised by the other subcommittees, by the UAC and as a whole, NASA and the ISS National Lab. And we also want to provide input and advice to the ISS National Lab and NASA for stimulating demand and supporting the low Earth orbit economy. One of the things that's very important to our group is the consistent and stable access to the ISS National Lab and facilities on board the ISS National Lab, as well as streamlining the processes that are in place right now to access those facilities. So our next step is to really solidify these goals and objectives. We'll schedule our quarterly meetings and then get to work and be a voice for this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for the Ted and Alessandro for your presentations, especially to Ray. We're going to take a brief break now. It's 2:40, so I think we're going to take a 15-minute break to allow people to go out, get a cup of coffee, stretch the legs. So we'll be back at 2:55, and I look forward to then having presentations by Nicole and myself on their other two committees. So if you would join us again at 2:55. Thank you. Well, welcome back. We'll have the next presenter, Nicole. If we could have the next slide, please. So Nicole Wagner will be talking about our Applied R&D Subcommittee. Take it away, Nicole.
All right, thank you, Doug. So my name is Nicole Wagner. I am currently the Applied R&D Subcommittee Chair for the User Advisory Committee for the International Space Station, and I also serve as President and CEO of Lambda Vision. And so what brings me here today is to talk a little bit about the work that the Applied R&D Subcommittee is doing, and some of the things that we're thinking about for the future. So our subcommittee is comprised of members with deep technical expertise in space production, biology, materials science, as well as some financial background as well. And we're trying to inform the US or ISS National Lab on some of the utilization goals, specifically as it relates to applied R&D for the development of scalable in-space production. And this is both for materials, biological materials, as well as physical materials as well. Next slide. So before I move forward, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the work that Lambda Vision is doing and how that experience is helping to inform some of the work that we're doing with this committee, because I do think that the Applied R&D Subcommittee really sits at the interface of many of the other subcommittees, including science, education, technology development, and then how people are working with implementation partners. So just quickly, Lambda Vision is developing a protein-based artificial retina to restore vision to the millions of patients that are blinded by end-stage retinal degenerative diseases. And so these diseases include macular degeneration and retinitis pigmentosa. Next slide. And so you may ask, how does a traditional biotech company get involved with space? And so we've been doing this, we got involved through Mass Challenge as part of the Casis Boeing Prize that was offered in 2016. And so what we've been looking at is how do we manufacture these artificial retinas in microgravity and the effects of microgravity on the assembly of these thin films. And so we have worked with implementation partners. We've worked on technology development. We've tried to think about the science and education as well. And a lot of this, as we're thinking through this, is to think about, scale of what a commercial production would look like. And, what are some of the resources that are going to be necessary to develop a commercial product in space. Next slide, please. And so our committee, we've had 2 meetings so far. We had one in May and one in October. And the goals of our, or some of the things that we discussed at that meeting were the pain points that are important to commercial users. So things like cadence of flights, up mass and down mass capabilities, and how that influences the development of technology. Crew time and skills needed for crew training. So how does that affect both the impact and cost of scheduling experiments for anybody thinking about doing research in space? This is not unique to us, and I think we've heard this echoed a little bit in Alessandro's presentation, but the needs of infrastructure to be able to grow work in low Earth orbit. And so this is both for commercial users as well as the United States. So these are simple things like cold stowage, glove boxes. But as we move forward and we start to think about scale of commercial production, that extends to space as well. And then lastly here is communication of lessons learned from the research that's being conducted on the ISS and how that informs future research or future work on the ISS as well. So can we come up with a best practices document to make research more accessible in low Earth orbit? So this includes things like manufacturing and mentoring, standardization of protocols as well. Next slide, please. And so at our last meeting in October, one of the things that we spent quite a bit of time talking about, and I think is a big, and which is very important for some of our applied R&D committee members, is the sustainability and extension of operations of the ISS beyond 2024. And so, as we're thinking about customers of the ISS, what does that look like? And how do we think about fundraising for operations beyond 2024 and as companies? And how do we think about developing our research and strategy as we think about extension of the lifetime of the ISS as well? We've also talked, and this alluded a little bit to the slide that I had previously, but prioritization of research on the ISS and the influence of that research on current resources. So when I talk about current resources, we're not just talking about things like cold stowage and glove boxes, but we're talking about how do we develop a strategy that allows for and promotes growth on board the ISS over time. So as we think about production and scaling, what is necessary in order to do that on the ISS? And as we start to ship, send larger boxes or, how we think about scale in that way, what is necessary there for us to do research on the ISS? Important things to our committee as well, and some of the things that we've just briefly started to talk about are the timelines needed for commercialization and identification of areas where we can increase throughputs of experiments being conducted. So this includes, this also relates a little bit to, can we create a best practices document? How do we streamline some of the research that's being done? How do we reduce some of the iteration that is currently happening in between experiments so that we can start to meet some of those commercial timelines. And, you know, in addition to that, what resources are needed as well to do that. And then really my last talking point here, before I turn it over to Doug, is optimization of the return capabilities from orbit and how we can use ISS as a potential test bed for some of those capabilities. You know, what we're hearing from some of our committee members is that there is an importance for reliable and dependable delivery and return vehicles from the ISS. But what we don't have a full understanding of now is what some of those user demands are and what some of those scaling needs are for our customers. And so some of the discussion that we've been having as a committee, and I've also been approached by a few stakeholders, is forming a payload task force to look at some of those scaling needs and user demands and potential use cases moving forward over the next couple of years to see if the current capabilities, both for up mass and down mass, are, you know, going to meet the demands of what some of the future capabilities or future scale will start to look like. And now I will turn it over to Doug, and I'll also be available for questions at the end.
Thanks, Nicole. So the Science Subcommittee is comprised of members interested in the scientific experiments that are being run, both in terms of research projects and observations of the celestial bodies that are viewed through the capabilities of NASA and use of the space station as a platform. So we do not only fundamental research in physical sciences, and I represent the physical sciences. Here with me today is Peter Lee. He's all involved with biological sciences. And so our committee is a combination of both mainly fundamental, but also translational research in how we're going to move forward and utilize this platform in LEO in order to conduct research that will change the way we look at basic concepts and bring new advantages to us here on Earth. Members in our committee include Deirdre Damas-Wilk. She's with GlaxoSmithKline. Amanda Evans, who's from Los Alamos. Ron Joslin, who's working with the National Science Foundation. Peter Lee is with Brown. Alexander Ostrogorsky is with Illinois Institute of Technology, and Paul Reichert works with Merck. Next slide, please. So we have quarterly meetings, and here's a schedule of what we're planning for in 2022. It's typically the third Tuesday of the month, but several of these months also have holidays in them, and that messes that up. So we'll be meeting January, April, July, and October. Public is invited, please attend. There is a web-based platform that is just coming out now. It's got a place where you can sign up for our Science Subcommittee meetings, and that allows us to then send you the various passwords and virtual meeting codes like you used when you came to today's meeting. So there, if you go to the website from the ISS National Labs homepage, clicking on Science Subcommittee will get you to this web portal. Next slide, please. So please, overall, that concludes our talk for today. And from our 5 subcommittees, we encourage you to visit the webpage and learn about our activities going along and keeping track of as things get posted in terms of meeting minutes and proposed activities. And if you have any questions, we would love to hear from the audience in terms of how it is that, what are the concerns of you, the people who are using the station or involved in the station, or providing resources to the station, please let us know. We need to have communication so that we can inform NASA and inform the executive director of where we are, where we're going, where are our challenges, where are opportunities where we can take advantage and multiply the gains from our activities. So please visit our committee site. Next slide. Okay. So now we're going to be starting the Q&A session. There is options for you to submit to the question and answer board. I'll be serving kind of as a moderator on that and pass things along to various subcommittees. So for example, there currently are 3 open questions. The first is a person involved in private for-profit on AI-based robotics research, and he wondered which subcommittee he should reach out to. Again, you have several options. I hesitate to say there's any one that would be, I would think you'd want to reach out to several. Would anyone like to make a comment on this? Like, Alessandro, would you like to comment on this possibly?
Could you please repeat the question because I had a moment?
You can click on the Q&A thing at the bottom of your screen. You should be able to read all of the questions from our audience. So this is, I think it's going to be either Nicole or me or Alessandro.
Yeah, well, what I can certainly share is we are very happy to talk to anybody that may have an input in the things that we're looking at. So all the processes and all the information related to technology development on the International Space Station and technology demonstration. So we are very happy to talk to more stakeholders. And in fact, as I mentioned in our presentation, we are trying to reach to a broader number of individuals. And therefore, yes, you can absolutely feel free to contact us directly.
And Nicole?
Yeah, I would also add, feel free to reach out to our committee. I mean, we're uniquely situated between really the interface of all of these committees, I think. I mean, I think as you're thinking about moving your technology forward, what resources would you need on the ISS? What collaborators would you be interested in working with? What do you think, or who would you want to interface with? All of those things are areas where our subcommittee can provide input, and we'd be, equally as interested in hearing your input moving forward as well.
Thank you. We have a question from Sue about, does the User Advisor Committee anticipate any interaction with the upcoming NASA Decadal Survey? And definitely we are interested in the activities of that, but it is not our job to guide that process. This is the scientific community that's going to be providing NASA and the national academies with information in terms of where the future of science investigations go. We're more involved with identifying and streamlining any problems and any potential opportunities, and how do we make the station operate such that all the users get the most out of their the time that they have available to them and get the return on the investment that the US public would like us to have for space experiments. So I would say we are not guiding that process. We have another question from Ann Wilson. What is the view of undergraduate research efforts on the ISS? She sees there is a role for undergraduate education and graduate research, but undergraduate research seems to be untapped. Ted, would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. And please reach out at the ISS National Lab website, and there's a form you can fill out. Definitely want to follow up with you. Undergraduates, untapped opportunity as we think about workforce development and future careers. It depends on the domain, I think, but there's clearly opportunities here for either piggybacking on research that's already underway, whether it's technology investigations or HTRL ratings or fundamental research. There are missions that have already flown in which there's a lot of data that's available. So if you think about data science and what have you, those opportunities are available as well. And just being able to connect undergraduates to what's happening in real time, I think is a really fundamental, visceral connection point for a lot of young people as well. So, and I think there's a lot of opportunities that they are untapped, I'd say. Also look at the National Lab research announcements. There are 2 that are scheduled to come out in 2022. I think the first one's supposed to come out in January or February. That's focused on education. I'm not sure what those will actually be focused on, but that's probably a really good entry point for you as well. So please reach out to our committee. We'd love to hear more from you and what you're up to.
Thank you, Ted. We have a question here from Wayne on, does the ISS manage its own SBIR STTR programs? And if not, who is given this? I'm going to turn this one over to Mike and let him answer. Go for it. Mike Roberts.
Thanks, Doug. Excellent question, Wayne. So I'm Mike Roberts. I'm the acting chief scientist for ISS National Lab. The ISS National Lab does not manage its own SBIR STTR program, but if you have technology that requires demonstration in the space environment, the International Space Station and the National Laboratory itself are both viable platforms for that TRL advancement. So if you currently have a funded SBIR or STTR grant through NASA, through National Science Foundation, through DOE, or other government agencies, have a communication with your funders at that agency about the need for moving it forward. It's difficult to do those flight demonstrations with early stage SBIR grants. So phase 1s, you typically would not have enough time or enough funding to do a flight. Phase 2, phase 3, the phase 2 extended for some of the agencies would enable that. So have a communication with your funding agency, have a communication with ISS National Lab. You can contact us. We can give you some more information about access points for that.
Thank you, Mike. All right, so let me get back here. I'd like to pass another question on to Ted here. Felix is asking, what educational opportunities do you have for aerospace students away from the United States?
That's a great question. The Center for Advancement of Science and Space, CASIS, manages the National Laboratory on the Space Station, has been put together through an act of Congress, and it's focused on U.S. and its territories. However, there are many organizations, at last count, in terms of the Space Station Explorers, the educational outreach part of the National Lab, there are nearly 6 different organizations that work both domestically and internationally. I know my company does, and there are many others as well. So I would say, go back to that form we have at the ISS National Lab website, fill it out, and we'll have the committee come together and answer that in a more general basis. It depends on what your field of study is, the age of the students, the outcomes you're trying to achieve, country-backed or whether it's an NGO, but we can definitely think about how we can collaborate and make sure you know about all the opportunities that are coming through the National Laboratory and other locations as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you. I have another question here. It's from an anonymous attendee, which is too bad. We don't know who you are, but it's a good question. And that's who do you follow up? Who would we follow up on for biomedical stem cell research? And I'm going to turn that over to Peter Lee here, who is part of our Science Subcommittee.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for that question. So not to focus on that particular topic, because there are a lot of topics, and if for whoever wrote that, please feel free to contact me, as I do have some research in that area and could help guide you to appropriate individuals who may be more specifically aligned with what you're interested in. But I think that brings up a bigger question of, if you have an area of research interest and don't know where to go, I think the User Advisory Committee and the Science Subcommittee in particular is a great resource, a place to start to find the right people. individuals on the committee, either they themselves are involved in various areas of research or know the right people to contact, is a good place to start. And obviously ASGSR, members of ASGSR do research almost all of these areas in gravitational and space research. So please do reach out to us if you have any questions and looking for right contacts, or through ASGSR, there are various methods there. But for the person who asked about the stem cell, you can reach out to me directly, as I do have some, I may be able to help you with that. You can, are our contacts all on the website? Individuals?
I think they can contact us through the Science Subcommittee.
Yeah, and
Yep.
all right, I will get you to the right people if it's not myself.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So I have another question here from Jeff. He's talking about infrastructure, and I'm going to turn this question over to Ray to answer. He says there's a lot of talk about infrastructure, but very little talk about space infrastructure. To what extent do we believe there are important and necessary infrastructure elements, terrestrial and celestial, that would be of interest, even concern, such as assured access to space? What is concern of the UAC, and should this be part of a broader infrastructure conversation, right?
Yeah, so I assume you're referring to the president's infrastructure initiative. And so to the best of my knowledge, I think there's some thought that NASA is included in that infrastructure bill, but I don't know that the details are particularly well formulated at this point. Clearly, there is additional infrastructure needs. You know, we have some science we can do with the facilities that exist on the ISS today. And I think this would be a good activity of the UAC, is to identify needs of the community so that we can share those with NASA and make sure that they're considered in any budget deliberations that occur. But right now, I would just, perfectly honest, I haven't seen any specific details as to specific plans that are in the infrastructure bill that would relate to space infrastructure. So hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you, Ray. All right, we have another question here that asks, what interaction, if any, is there between the UAC and NASA-sponsored experiments? Who would like to handle that one?
I'm not sure I understand it, but I think I can.
Okay, Ray says he'll come by. How's that?
So, so NASA has an allocation that they use for NASA-sponsored experiments, and CASES has an allocation for those that are non-NASA. But we do collaborate with NASA very closely on missions and projects that they want to utilize the CASES allocation. So I'm not really clear that I understand the question, but there is collaboration between NASA and CASES regarding, both NASA requirements and requirements that come up from the user community. And, that's part of the juggling act that we have to do, is to make sure that we're, balancing the requirements and the needs of the community so that everybody gets an opportunity to fly their science on ISS.
And I think to add to that, if any of the NASA sponsored projects are in the science realm, the Science Subcommittee is there as a liaison to help answer any questions or address any concerns. So, there's that connection.
All right. You have one specific question on superconductor applications, and I think we can say that would be for a topic for another meeting, not for the general audience. So at the moment, there are no other open questions. I hope, does the audience have any more things they would like us to discuss? Well, if not, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and having some really spirited discussions here at the end, and for the educational aspects of learning about the various subcommittees. And please, I encourage our audience, come on aboard. You know, we need your help. We want, as a group, to encourage everybody to give us input, because we need to make this work. We need to have this expanded out so that we're getting as much utilization as possible. And oh, I do have one last question. It's a biggie, unfortunately for us. And Ray, you're up again. Okay. It says, could you clarify the role of CASIS and NASA in the management of ISS?
Oh, okay.
That's a biggie, yeah.
So I mean, I think that's probably the $64 million question. I believe that I can describe it the following way. CASIS receives our funding through NASA, but as you know, CASIS was established by a legislative act of Congress. So while we work very closely with NASA, we're not their contractor. We work very collaboratively to implement the requirements that were levied in the legislation to manage the national lab. Now, clearly, you know, we have lots of interest in using the national lab for science, and also, you know, to expand our understanding of how we live and work in space. So I think what you know, probably the best way to answer this is that CASIS was started 10 years ago, and I would offer that it was an experiment, was taking a new path. It's not necessarily exactly the same as all the other terrestrial national labs. And I think every day we're learning more and more about how to effectively manage the resource we have and balance that with the needs that NASA has to, you know, further their understanding of how we live and work in space, and hopefully expand our presence in space in the future. So I hope I answered your question. I will add, because I know this is a limited time frame, I plan to be walking around the conference over the next few days. If you're more comfortable accosting me in the crowd and dragging me off to a corner, I'm happy to answer these questions. And, you know, I'd share with you that it's not necessarily always as clear as you want it to be, but what we do is we work every day very closely with our NASA partners and try to make sure we're balancing the needs of the community to use the ISS to its fullest. So.
Good. Well, thank you for that discussion, Ray. And so what I'd like to do is just point out, if you're here in Baltimore at the ASGSR meeting, please feel free. I'll be wandering around. There'll be various members of the committee wandering around. And specifically, just if somebody's got a name tag and it says ISS National Labs, stop them and say hi. All right. So with that, I think we're going to close this meeting. Thank you all for your attention.